So welcome everybody. Today we're going to tackle something that I think is very interesting and very confusing to many people, is where do we find Mary in the Bible? Because she's the mother of God. There's not a whole lot said about her in the New Testament, but she becomes so powerful to the Catholic Church, and we talk about her as the mother of Jesus and the mother of the church. We bring her up. Well, where does all that come from? And she has all these names. So she's the Ark of the Covenant, she's the Ivory Tower, she's the Rose. And I was always very confused. Where does all that come from? Where does all those titles come from? Because the actual references to her are pretty small. Mm-hmm. But to figure out where all of that comes from, you have to go all the way back to the Old Testament. And where is she prefigured in the Old Testament? By symbols. And then where is she prefigured by people? So I have to give credit where credit is due. A couple years ago, I was just stymied by this. And I taught Sunday school, I taught vacation Bible school. I'm one of those people never skip church. I don't sleep in and say, well, God will hear me when I'm on the ski slopes. No, I get up and I go to church. Right. But I could never figure out where all this came from. So I took a class written based on a book written by Scott Hahn. So I'll give credit where credit is due. I took a Bible study that was based on a book he wrote, and then I also started reading like the source here, the Old Testament, and a bunch of other different places. So I've got to give credit where credit's due. So to get a lot of this stuff today, I went through the Old Testament, the New Testament, Scott Hahn's work, the Marian blogger, and then a lovely book that was written in 1957 called Women of the Bible, and it tells about 12 stories of women of the Bible. Okay. So I gathered it from a lot of different places. Where does all that prefiguring come from? Okay. So to me, this is an exciting topic. She's actually my namesake. Maureen means Little Mary in Gaelic.
Oh, okay.
So, hey,
that's awesome.
Where does all these stories about, where does the belief and the traditions about Mary come from?
Where's she at?
Yep. Yeah, where's she at and where did she come from?
Exactly. Okay. So start off by, what is typology?
So typology means where do you see something of a similar type somewhere else?
Okay.
Another way to think about it is prefiguring. Where do you see a similar figure somewhere else? And typology is often thought of as the people that we know of, the great leaders, the spiritual leaders, often had another person in previous that had similar characteristics and had something similar in their story. So you can draw a connection between David the shepherd and Jesus the shepherd. You can draw a connection. They had some characteristics that we see carried forward into somebody else. So that's typology.
Okay. All right.
So, it's like when people look at you and go, you look just like your mother.
Oh, right. Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Or like mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my mother after all. You catch yourself doing the same things your mother did or your grandmother did. So some of those traits and characteristics prefigured you, came before you, and you carry them through.
Okay.
And it ties into another one of those words that I really didn't get. So you're having the Winnie the Pooh movement. Think. What does that mean? What does the fulfillment of time mean? What does the word fulfillment mean? It means this is actually the manifestation of that idea.
Oh, okay.
That was another one that threw me off. Fulfillment. Okay, that's what that one means. I am the manifestation, or this event is the manifestation of something that was prophesied.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Got it. I'm a follower. I promise.
So the first one is Eve.
Right.
And this is the one that really threw me off, because you don't hear much about Eve, but when you think about it, she's the first woman. Mm-hmm. So she's the first woman, the first wife, the first mother, the first grandmother. So all of humanity comes from the first woman, Eve. Everything sprang from that first family. Mm-hmm. So she was really essential to the first covenant, which was the promise of a first family, humanity as we know it. But when you look at it, how does Eve prefigure Mary? I wasn't really getting it. Because when you think about it, what we hear about her, she's created from this rib of man to be man's helpmate, to walk alongside man. But really, you don't hear much about her except that she commits what we would call the first sin. So God says, basically, I'm going to give you just one big rule, and it's don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the tree of knowledge seems to symbolize being able to think like God, to be able to reason like God. So the tree of knowledge, okay, just Don't mess with that. Just trust me. I'm here to take care of you. I'm going to give you good guidance. And she doesn't. So the serpent tempts her, and what does she do? She takes the apple from the tree of knowledge, which enables her to have deeper reasoning and deeper understanding,
Right.
and probably increases her creative ability. She takes a bite. Not only does she do it, she hands it over to Adam.
Right.
Adam takes it too.
He's like, okay.
And so from that one, you get the first true disobedience to God that we have recorded. I said, don't do it. You did it anyway. And then you pulled your husband into the equation. And then your son, Cain, your first son, kills your second son. And it's the first time I started tracking that admonition in the Old Testament says that the sins of the father will be visited to the third and fourth generation. And you see it. So Eve starts out, and her name means breath. Starts out like a good thing because we have the breath of God, we have the breath of the Holy Spirit, and things go downhill rapidly when she disobeys. And then we see this just carry forward. But the difference is, she started the first family, but because of what she did, they become mortal, and they're kicked out of Eden. So that opportunity to really be the ideal mother, wife, everything is kind of blown out of the water.
Out the window.
Pretty quickly seems to be blown out of the window because of disobedience. So how does that tie into Mary? How do you think Eve ties into Mary?
Well, I mean, they're both kind of a first mother in one way or the other. And it is always said that Mary is the new Eve because Eve said no to God, whereas Mary said yes to God.
Yep.
So that's one of the bigger ones that we see. She's kind of the fulfillment of that prophecy that came after the fall of man.
Yeah. So when you look at that, both women lost a son, but one woman committed a sin, and then that opens the door to evil and to darkness. The other one didn't. And even though her son is murdered out of evil, she wasn't sinful herself, and neither was her son. So that generational sinfulness stops right there. So the second family that's produced, the Holy Family, we have the opportunity to have a different role model and to go a different way.
Okay. Right. She's the new path. Just
Yeah.
the plan B, but plan B was better.
Well, especially because this is the part of being a child of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s was the big move for women's rights and women's equality. And, most of the Bible seems to be written about men. But if you keep looking, you see some remarkable women in the Bible, and you see how they're role models. So it was hard for me to try to connect to someone who didn't seem to have much substance in the Bible. So you have to keep looking. Where's the substance of this woman? Because I would like a strong woman, a
Right.
strong female role model. So if you keep looking, you find it. And here's the other one that really got my attention is this one always threw me off. It probably till very recently did. We're always using the word Virgin Mary, Virgin Mary. It's not like a first name, it's a title. Her name is Mary. So why do we use it over and over again? And why do we keep doing that? And when you think about it, if you think of virginity in terms of spiritual purity, Mary kept her spiritual purity the whole time. She became an earthly mother, and she said yes to God, but she always remained strong in her faith. She didn't disobey God, whereas Eve does.
Right.
And when she does that, it's her spiritual purity that goes away.
Right.
So that one's just been a harder path for me. What does that mean? Because you keep hearing it over and over again. Virgin Mary, the virginity of Mary. It's not just physical, it's spiritual, it's metaphysical. I'm going to continue obeying even at a high cost. So we don't actually know, besides that one temptation, what Eve was tempted with. But we know with Mary, she could have been tempted to say no to God, right? Because in her culture, if you're an unmarried young Jewish girl, you could be stoned to death by your father, by whoever you were promised to, because you'd been unfaithful. So when she says yes, she's showing tremendous bravery. She says yes, abandons all of that ego fear, all of that human fear, and just says yes.
So I have a question about this. So Mary is known to have been immaculately conceived, right? Which means conceived without sin. Okay. So that means she still has all of the gifts of, she has all of the gifts that Adam and Eve were meant to have in the beginning because she doesn't have the stain of original sin.
Yeah.
Right? So therefore, not that she doesn't have free will, because Adam and Eve still had free will. But there's that sentence that you said where like her bravery, and she could have said no to God, but from the beginning she was crafted particularly for the conception of Christ. So was there really a possibility of her saying no?
I think so, because we all have free will at all times. Even Jesus says, if it isn't against your will, let this cup pass from me. Even Jesus, the direct Son of God, the pure Son of God, had the opportunity to say, I'm not sure I want to do this. Heck, Moses said it 7 times. You got the wrong guy. True. I'm sure Mary had the opportunity because of free will to say, I think I might have changed my mind, or I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. Because God gives all of us free will.
Right. But if it goes against, like, we cannot do that which goes against our nature, right? Mm-hmm. That which we are not made to be. So if Mary's nature was perfect, insofar as a human nature could be perfect, like it doesn't make sense that the possibility of her saying no would even be kind of in her brain, I guess. Because, like, yeah, you have the cultural thing, but she also, like, perfectly trusted God and didn't have the same kind of, like, fear that we do because of unknowing. Like, there's all those details,
Well, I just think we often wonder, God sends us here for a purpose, and we get here and we forget the purpose and we get lost. But if she was a young Jewish girl, and their culture says the most important thing a woman does and the biggest blessing is to have children. So she was already betrothed to somebody. Mm-hmm. So it just seems like she had that opportunity there to just go on and have a normal life. And then God kind of steps back into the equation and says, I called you to this. I want you to do this. Are you still willing to do it? Mm-hmm. Maybe, I'm not a Marian theologist, but it just seems like that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of questions that people have had about it, and it's a big discussion where it's just so easily said, like, oh, well, Mary just said yes, and it was so brave and whatever, and it's like, well, we have to think about her nature and all the other details and the rest of her story before the Annunciation. So
yeah.
Sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate, but
no, it's a great question, because we see so little, we hear so little about her that she kind of just all of a sudden appears and says yes. Mm-hmm. But there's probably she had a whole life before she became the mother of God. She was somebody's daughter. She might have had sisters or brothers. She had a whole life, and she would have been in this culture that expected her to step into this particular role, because the greatest blessing to her would be to be a mother. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. I'll let we can continue on now.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's probably a conversation for someone a little more erudite than I am in Marian theology. But the next one I think is really exciting, because this one threw me off. And thanks to the book by Scott Hahn, and then going through the Bible study based on that book, I was trying to figure out why she called the Ark of the Covenant. Mm-hmm. It seems such a strange thing to call someone like this large gold covered box with seraphim on either side. It's almost like you're referring to her as luggage that was hauled all over. The Ark of the Covenant got picked up and moved. It went on this long, long journey before it ended up with David in Jerusalem. So how did she end up getting that moniker of Ark of the Covenant? So when you think about it, this was one of those few times when something is explained to me very simply that I probably heard many times before, but it didn't sink in. Mm-hmm. That the Ark of the Covenant had 3 things inside of it. And the question was proposed, what are the 3 things in the covenant? I know you know what they are. So what are the 3 things in the Ark of the Covenant? Well,
you had the tablets, right? And then you had that's it. That's all I got.
Oh my God. So you had the tablets, which is the law of Moses. So that's a covenant right there, right? Mm-hmm. And then we had the staff of Aaron, and that's the sign of the priestly sign,
right.
The staff
Priest,
of
prophet,
Aaron.
and king. Right.
Good, perfect.
Right.
And the other one is the manna. And all of those things came from the Mosaic covenant. Mm-hmm. And what we really get out of the Mosaic covenant is truly the law. That's what we remember, the 10 Commandments.
Right, that's the biggest.
That's the big thing. So those 3 important symbols are inside this gold-covered box that gets carried from Egypt all the way through 40 years of wandering. It gets moved from Judah to Israel and back down and around. It takes this long, circuitous journey to get to the Promised Land, which was promised to Moses. It takes a very long, circuitous journey. When you think about that, so Jesus was the high priest. He was a rabbi. And he even his disciples understood that when he's doing the Passover meal, he's in the role of the priest as he does it. So he's the high priest. He calls himself, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. So there's manna. Like, I am the bread from heaven, and we enjoy it now in the Eucharist. And the last one is the law. And we've talked about this, and I joke about it. So we started with the 10, like 10. And you people, like, come on, just there's 10 of them.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Moses moves out of Egypt with roughly 1.5 million people who have all these weird habits and behaviors and traditions. And we have to get rid of those. As my father would say, we have to smite them. So...
Jeez,
so we're like, whoa, you people do that? So all of a sudden we end up with 613 rules. So when you're reading through Leviticus and you're going, what is that? Well, it's probably because all these things happen. Here's all the other weird stuff we've encountered, but it always goes back to the 10, which are how to live a moral life. And 3 are about connecting your relationship with God, and the other one rules about a moral life. And Jesus says, I am the fulfillment of the law. If you guys did everything out of those 10 commandments right for your whole life, this is what it would look like. This is it, you guys. Here, I'm just showing that you can actually do this. If you really focus on it, you can get all 10 right. So if she's the Ark of the Covenant, because Jesus was the bread from heaven, he was a high priest, and he was the fulfillment of the law.
He was the new word.
And that just makes so much sense. I am the new covenant. There's the Mosaic covenant. And then through Mary comes someone who was actually the fulfillment of the Mosaic covenant. And she ushers in a whole new covenant that says, and I'm going to reach out to children, all of my children, everywhere. Whoever hears me, listens to my voice, and follows me is a child of God. Now we're going past the people that Moses dragged around for 40 years. We're going to open this up to everybody. You don't need 613 laws. Even 10, I'm going to get it down to 2. Love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind, and love your neighbors yourself. The whole new covenant. Simplified. We're down to 2 things here.
It was really interesting because this morning on the morning show, they were, one of our counselors was talking about the Pharisees and all of their rules and how they were separating themselves based upon their holiness. And so when you're talking about all the rules that they had, he was talking about how the Pharisees had made rules. They had made all of these rules, and so all these Jews were like, oh, well, we have to do this, we have to do that, and we have to do this. And so this is why this Mary and Christ coming is so important in regards to covenants, is because there was such confusion, and this person was saying this, and this person was saying this, and oh, you're not a Jew, and oh, yes, you are a Jew, you know. And so that's why it was really messy. Yeah.
When you look at that, interesting, because we'll get to this in another session, but there was so much corruption in the faith, and it had become so politicized and so power and greed oriented. Okay, let's take it back from the 10 commandments and the 613 rules in here. We got to step this way back. Pull all the greed. You're going to get tithes out of poor people, for heaven's sake. Let's just get it down to something simple. And we're going to pull all the people who are corrupting this covenant. I'm going to pull you out of the equation because you guys are not good shepherds, and I'm the good shepherd.
That ain't it.
Yeah. And the other thing about this one, when you think about the ark, like I said, it moved. It starts in Egypt, and then it moves, and it goes up and around, and comes back down, and then it's up here, and it's back down here. Well, I had to think about this because we did the geography of the covenants a couple sessions ago. So I was thinking about this weekend, and I went, oh, well, look at Mary. So they're up here in Galilee, which would have been the country of Israel, and then Israel and Judah had not only split, they'd actually fought each other and taken each other slaves and everything. So she's up here. And
slaves and everything.
She's up here, and then she gets brought down here because of the census when she's due to have a baby. The Ark of the Covenant now goes from up here in Galilee, which would have been the land of Israel, and she comes down here to Jerusalem. So now the Ark of the Covenant has been in all of the we're moving through the tribes, right? And then the Ark of the Covenant is born in Jerusalem, David's city, the kingly covenant. And then quickly, where does she get dragged after that, after the birth?
To Egypt.
Egypt. Now the covenant goes back to Egypt, right? The Ark of the Covenant goes back to Egypt.
Right, following the path.
And I just thought about that. You know, Mary's trajectory goes like this too, just like we saw the covenants went all over the map. And then it sounds like 2 years in Egypt, and then it looks like they were intending to go back to Jerusalem, the home of the Ark. And they hear about the murder. Well, let's see, they left because of the murder of Herod, and then his son was even worse. So instead of going back through Jerusalem, they take a detour and they go back up north. So she's doing this huge trek like this. So the Ark of the Covenant's going down like this, back up where we started.
Yep, making that same triangle shape.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just very interesting. And the other one that I thought was fun was there's at one point in the story of David when the Ark of the Covenant isn't with him. And I don't remember exactly why it's not with him, but they try to bring it to him, and it sounds like it starts to tip, and the guy reaches out to touch it. You're not supposed to touch the Ark of the Covenant, right? Only the priestly people can do this. And this guy reaches out to
catch it.
And he dies. And David's like, whoa! I don't want to be around that thing.
Yeah.
Whoa,
that's aggressive.
And he's mad at God, and he kind of argues with God about the Ark of the Covenant. This is scary. You know, why would you do this? But when the Ark of the Covenant comes back, David dances, and he leaps before the Lord. And when Mary goes to see Elizabeth, the baby leaps in her womb. So it's kind of like that. The happiness of the Ark of the Covenant is David, the king, dancing before the Ark of the Covenant, and then John leaping inside his mother's womb. So you see that
it's a whole, if you look at those two sections, it's a whole, almost word for word, quote unquote, you might say there. Like one segment matches and mirrors in one manner the next. So if you're looking through the Samuel and Luke, it's crazy to just see how parallel they are.
So I think it was Saint Irenaeus that says that the New Covenant is the fulfillment of the Old Testament, and the New Covenant is revealed in the Old Testament. So it's just so interesting when you line them up like this and you see the references with Samuel and Luke going like that. They're in parallel construction. And that really helped me understand the parallel construction between Mary and the Ark of the Covenant and Mary and Eve. When you start looking at those descriptions of things together, you start to see how they connect. Yeah. Oh, and the other one too, the number 3 we talked about, number of perfection, and 7 is the number of completeness.
Yeah.
So the number 3 shows up in Mary, the Ark of the Covenant too, because for 3 months, when David was afraid of the Ark of the Covenant, he left it in another city, and the house. I'll get this right. Obed-Edom, the house, he leaves it there. Everything starts going well for them. They start to flourish in that amount of time. So David goes back. Well, things probably safe now. I'll go get it. And he brings the covenant.
I might not die.
He brings the covenant to Jerusalem. And then when Mary finds out that the angel tells her she's pregnant, what does she do? She does a journey up to Judah. And for 3 months, she stays with Elizabeth. So the Ark of the Covenant has that wonderful number of 3. I'm going to bring something to fulfillment, 3, perfection.
Right. Okay. Ugh, love numbers.
And then we'll now take that one far forward. We have 3 days in the tomb, right? But you see that number 3 going
3
forward.
Of perfection.
Yeah, so Jesus had a temporary residence in Judah, which is interesting because when you look at where the covenant of David was made, I always thought it was made in Jerusalem, but it actually wasn't. It was made outside of Jerusalem, still in the area of Judah, but it wasn't made directly in Jerusalem.
Like when David was blessed as king.
When he's blessed as king.
Okay.
It isn't.
Right, yeah, it's out somewhere in the desert.
Yeah. And the other one that really got my attention was that whole concept of when Mary is told by Gabriel that she will bear the son, she says, how can this be? I don't know God. I don't know man.
Right.
And he says, the Spirit will overshadow you, which goes way back here, what happens with the Ark of the Covenant when they're moving it? The Spirit overshadows it. This big cloud surrounds it, and the presence of God is always seen with a cloud coming down. So the Spirit of God, which I think to me might be the Holy Spirit, overshadowed the original covenant, and then it overshadowed Mary as well.
Yeah, so she would have understood that imagery.
Yeah.
Based upon her knowledge and her time as a child in, she was at the temple. Like, her parents gave her up to the temple. So she, this is important because for her, she would have been like, oh, based on her education.
And here's the last one I like about the Ark of the Covenant, because it was in 1989, go way back in time, and I heard a priest give a sermon, and he was very animated about the people asking him the question, well, didn't Mary have other kids? You know, why do we say that she was perpetually a virgin? Why wouldn't she have other kids? And he was very animated about this. And he was talking about how in the Bible, the word brethren can also mean cousins.
Yes.
So when we say brethren, we're not necessarily saying brothers and sisters.
There's no Hebrew word for cousin, so...
Yeah, but I remember watching this guy thinking, wow, he is really animated about this. And I was trying to figure out, it's taken a long time, how could you possibly simplistically explain to someone that she chose a consecrated life? Because it still would have been atypical.
Yeah, kind of looked down on. Like, why wouldn't you want, like, boatloads of children? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, especially in a tribal society, that's how you keep the tribe alive, right? Because, infant mortality is pretty high.
By a tribe.
you have a bunch of family, like farmers. She's like, you have a bunch of families to keep everything going. So why would she have continued to leave a consecrated life? Well, God called her to this.
Yeah.
She gives us a son, and she continues in the consecrated life. I had never quite thought of it that way, that even in the Middle Ages, we had husbands and wives who had consecrated lives. They were joined in marriage, but they lived consecrated lives. Well, that isn't unheard of. Jesus had a consecrated life. John had a consecrated life. It isn't a stretch of the imagination to say that this woman who had the indwelling of the Holy Spirit stayed in a consecrated life with her husband.
Yeah.
It's not a...
Hence, Josephite marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the last one that I got out of really thinking about that one, the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay. We'll just make a little note. The sound here is different. Technical difficulties.
But we overcame.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this last section is something that's always been a hot spot for me. Mary as the daughter of Zion. And that isn't the hot spot. The hot spot for me is how women are portrayed often as the source of evil and the temptation. And when you say the daughter of Zion, and then you see all these references, especially when you're reading Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea, and the harlot, the daughter of Zion is the harlot.
Right.
And she's the one who's...
Cursed be you, O daughter of Zion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
She's promiscuous. She's unfaithful. Especially you get that again in Revelation, the unfaithful harlot, the daughter of Zion, the daughter of Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
So why would you call Mary the daughter of Zion?
Yeah, that's a little blasphemous.
Yeah, because you keep seeing all these calls come back to holiness, back to holiness. I thought, why would you call her that? Because I couldn't think of a positive reason to call Mary.
She's the image of purity and goodness.
That's it.
Right. Because
if you were the perfect daughter of Zion, if you were faithful, if you were spiritually holy, you would behave like Mary.
Okay.
So that was such a stretch for me because... Okay, so what does it look like if you are the pure daughter of Zion and Zion is the same as Jerusalem? What would it look like? You would be like her. You would say yes to God. You would be humble. You would be holy. You would continue obeying God. You would represent Israel and Jerusalem well.
Well, and if you think about, well, especially if you've been watching The Chosen, you get this a lot, where all of them are desiring this perfection and desiring holiness, like all of them, so much. And they're waiting for the Messiah. And so Mary is this image of what they wanted Israel to be as a nation, like as a people. They were like, what, we want to be perfect and holy. And, there was all that separation happening and they were striving for this perfection. And so Mary was kind of the first stepping stone before Christ was of age and all of that, before they were introduced to Christ. But she was kind of like a light sign, like a neon sign of like, this is what I have in store for you.
I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah.
There I go again.
But yeah, you're right, because if the new covenant has to come from a place of holiness, it has to come from, okay, it's a new start. So I'm going to pick this young woman who says yes, who is holy and known to be holy. We're going to start again. But isn't that interesting? Because I just caught that. The other covenants all came through men. This one was introduced through a woman. This new covenant came through a woman who was holy and pure and faithful. Yeah,
it's the new breath.
breath.
Right. We start over, but
yeah,
literally.
yeah, the Spirit coming in. So I really like that one. That really helped me clear up, why would you refer to her this way? Because if you go forward to Revelation, we see it again. We see the harlot again. But she's the hope of what we could be individually, but the hope of what we could be as a nation is Mary. There's a hope of a nation. And it draws you back all the time. Because I was looking at this in the church fathers. We're talking about the sacraments. And somebody brought up about the mysteries of the church, that Jesus is in all the sacraments, and somebody said, well, how could Jesus be in the sacrament of marriage because he wasn't married? Right? But if you think about it, and Jesus is the bridegroom and Israel is the bride. Yeah. Mary represents the best of Israel. She represents the bride that the bridegroom wants.
Right.
Is Mary.
Yeah. Well, and Christ represented what kind of relationship he wanted you to emulate in marriage as well with the church. Not so much on like the actual human level, but insofar as like how we treat one another, insofar as how relationships work. We see that in his relationships with the apostles. We see that in his relationship with his mother. I mean, we are supposed to have the same kind of relationships that he emulated with those in his life, and they were his church, right? So,
well, when you say that too, you see that she is there at the foot of the cross. Everybody else ran away. So what kind of relationship do we want to have? We stay when everybody else runs away. We stay in the middle of suffering and pain. So she is the daughter. She's the child of God who stays. And then she's in the upper room with them when the door is locked because they're afraid. And she's still there.
Yep.
She's still there. And then during Pentecost, she's there when the Holy Spirit comes in. So she is the child of God, the daughter of God, who's faithful, even in the face of something that must have been horrific.
Oh, I'm sure.
The death of your child.
Right.
Didn't wander, didn't turn away, didn't raise her fist at God.
Well, because she knew, right? She knew it was coming. And she was like, this has to happen. And I'm glad I get to be here to support him through this. Yeah. Right? So yes, she had her heart pierced with a sword, but also I'm sure it was also sort of joy because she knew what it was for and the why and the how and what was going to happen, right? So it was a joy and sorrow at the same time, which we understand. We felt multiple emotions at one time.
Actually, now that you say that, I hadn't thought of it until you just said that Mary being in the upper room, she was probably there helping them in their unbelief. Yeah. Because this was her son. She knew the story, and they're all just locked up there because they're afraid.
She was being their mother and supporting them while they were afraid, but she knew that her son was coming back, and so she was like, just wait, everybody, like, just wait. He's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are the ones I picked out. So what does the daughter of Zion mean? What is the Ark of the Covenant? Why is she the new Eve? But then I thought about it. With Mary, the story of Eve comes full circle. It's like woman has an opportunity this time to start and stay right. Right. Start and stay right. And that's not just the family of humanity. So Eve is the mother of all humanity. But Mary becomes the mother of spiritual children, spiritual humanity.
Yes.
So we find God through her son.
The eternal mother.
Yeah. So that was it. That was one of my big revelations.
On another episode of Mind Blown.
Another episode for me of, wow, you didn't get that in the first 59 years? Really? You are such a slow learner.
No. That's what's great about Catholicism, is that we're eternally learning, and we're all in our own stages of each other's journey. And sometimes, even though one person may be younger or whatever, they may have gotten to a different part of the story before you did. And so they help you figure that out.
Well, that's why I'm so grateful for this podcast, because I taught Sunday school to kids. I did vacation Bible school, and you never stop learning.
No.
you're getting ready for whatever the next event is, and you read something again and you get something completely different out of it. And, thank heavens for Father Mike Schmitz when I'm doing yard work and everything, and he's in my ears with the Bible New Year. Every single time you interact with somebody, you can get something else out of it that'll help you look at the whole thing and go, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Right, and you're kind of all on the same journey, looking at it the same way, not necessarily interpreting it differently, right? That leads to issues, but working together through the same lens, right? That's crucially important. You have to have that, the correct lens on there, but yeah. Alrighty, so what are we talking about next time?
Well, next time we're going to pick up Mary and typology, where she prefigured, but from ladies of the Old Testament.
Oh, okay.
So today was just talking about symbols. So Eve, well, she was an old lady of a lady of the Old Testament, but she's also got tremendous symbology for us. The Ark of the Covenant is a non-human thing, and Daughter of Zion is a title. But what if we just looked at 3 or 4 women who something about them, you go, oh, that reminds me of Mary. Because she would have known the stories, right?
Right.
So here's some ladies from the Old Testament who did something or whose behavior reminded us and prefigured what Mary would become.
Beautiful. Alrighty. Well, guys, quick announcement. We are going to be moving release dates from Wednesdays at 10 to Thursdays at 10, just because we have lots of other content coming out from something like Catholic Radio. Yay! So go ahead and check those out on YouTube. And of course, they're also available in our new app, which just launched. So go and download the app, and you'll then have access to all of our podcasts in your pocket. And it'll be great. And you'll be happy. And I'll be happy. And she'll be happy. And everyone will be happy. So please go check that out. And then follow everybody on Instagram. We have lots of new content coming out on our social media because we really want to give you the behind the scenes look at all of that stuff. So anyway, God bless, guys, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay, bye-bye. It's a great day to be Catholic.